There was this song we listened to recently that was inspired by the Great Depression, or especially the relationships during the Depression era. And it was about the unemployment and all of that. And it was a very cool song. But today we are reacting to what dating during the Great Depression was like actually was like. Um in the song, like that's like my nearest knowledge of what a relationship could be like during the depression era, but it was a song. Oh, I forgot the name of the song. Someone commented down below, but it was very like the woman was like telling the man like it's okay, like you're okay, we're still together, everything's gonna be fine. It was really beautiful. But let's see what it actually was like.
The Great Depression was far more depressing than it was great. And like any national crisis worth its salt, it took its toll on everyone's sexual relationships. Millions were suffering under catastrophic economic conditions, so dating wasn't really on anyone's mind. In fact, as a result of all the turmoil and strife, sexual attitudes of the era changed dramatically in some surprising ways, and not always for the better. So, today we're going to take a look at what dating was like during the Great Depression. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. After that, leave a comment and let us know what other topics you would like to hear about. Okay, at least love don't cost a thing.
The not so great depression. Chan chan chan. I'm like, I don't know how dating was back then, because nowadays, like, I just find that, like, especially women nowadays have very high expectations going into a relationship. So if it was like that back then, but I just don't see, like, I don't think it was like that back then. I would hope not. I would hope it wasn't like that right now, but.
The Roaring Twenties were so awesome, they decided to call them the Roaring Twenties, which is an impressive nickname for a decade. But as is usually the case, the good times wouldn't last. Starting in 1929, the world began to experience such an unprecedented economic downturn that the period was dubbed the Great Depression. The Depression brought with it mass unemployment, and that left most people's lives as little more than a daily struggle to survive. That, in turn, caused marriage rates to decline, families to shrink, and the roles of men and women in society to change in some fairly complex ways. People still found ways to express their sexuality and expend their pent-up sexual energy. But the liberal attitudes about sex that had flourished during the 20s disappeared during the 30s. As American culture turned more traditional about sex, people increasingly looked elsewhere for activities to wean themselves off of it. Swing dancing and the jitterbug, for example, were dances that became popular during the time. Swing dancing during a sexual fast is arguably playing with fire, but doing the jitterbug will all but guarantee your celibacy.
Sorry, but I just love like the dances that they had before. But I'm just like, it's funny to think that nowadays, like, dance to my eyes looks very cool. Like if I see someone like do hip hop dances, I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. But maybe like in the future they'll look back in time, because this will be history someday, and be like, they danced like that, you know?
Sporting events provided another outlet and distraction during the Great Depression. Men and women listened to baseball games on the radio, visited boxing matches, and became increasingly involved in football as a means of escape that didn't involve any smooching. These days, shirtless men with sledgehammers are used to sell everything from calendars to pickup trucks. But back in the Great Depression, these kinds of images were
I am so sorry if someone owns a calendar with like shirtless men, but I have never understood that. Like, I would be the last person to buy a calendar with shirtless men, like, just on my wall. Like, what? Like, why? I know it's a big market for it as well, but like who buys that? Why would you do that? Why what like I just don't. I just like, it's just my maybe like just as a I would maybe buy it as a joke to someone, but like I wouldn't seriously go and buy a calendar with shirtless men and put it on my wall. That's so like I don't know, but that's just weird to me.
Associated with the numerous government programs that ran as part of FDR's New Deal, including the Civilian Conservation Corps. The programs allowed men to earn money working the land while finding camaraderie with other men in the exact same situation. At the same time, the government, aware of how unemployment had damaged the collective male psyche, promoted propagandic images portraying the American man as virile and strong. This determination to recoup the male image spilled over into New Deal-era art and literary portrayals of men as well. Soon enough, there was a depiction of a muscular, bare-chested tough guy waiting around every corner. The modern beefcake was born. As for the ladies, this newfound acceptance for bearing skin slowly encouraged them to begin showing off their stomachs on the beach. And when no one landed in jail because of it, they started doing the same in day-to-day life, and even on social occasions. Meanwhile,
How do we go from that to this? And how, like,
some people were still wrapping their heads around the idea of bare-chested men and bare midriff women. Others were ditching clothing altogether. The nudism movement, which was already popular in Europe, thrived during the first decades of the 20th century.
I think it's still popular in Europe. I've seen hotels here that are like nudist hotels, like the whole hotel. You just walk around butt naked. And there's also a lot of beaches. And yeah, I it's not like my go-to place to go, like I think Finnish people are very conserved. Like that wouldn't happen in Finland. Well, not really. I mean, there's saunas, but it's like I don't know. I just but I have stumbled across a beach like that by accident, and I was just baffled. I was like, how did I get here?
Thanks to its association with naturalism. However, the movement faced opposition, and it petered out. Relaxed ideas about showing skin during the Great Depression, however, allowed nudism to become popular again during the early 1930s. There were efforts to ban nudism in major cities like New York and Chicago, but some people also expressed support for the creation of nudist spaces. A group of nudists, for example, bought land in northern Indiana and established a resort at the Lake of the Woods Club in 1933. Lake of the Woods, indeed. Homosexuality was still taboo in America, but during the 1920s, homosexual men were able to openly live in cities like Chicago and San Francisco, albeit in a relatively quiet way. But during the Great Depression, the pendulum swung back the other direction. As soon as the financial outlook turned grim, gay men found themselves being blamed for the economic downturn by weakening the male identity. Drag shows, gay nightclubs, and other so-called pansy parlors began to be shut down en masse. At the same time, same-gender relations were increasingly portrayed as a mental illness, similar to those which affected voyeurs and child molesters. That false association took root and quickly led to the active criminalization of homosexuality. During the Depression, any woman who expressed too much of an interest in sports or not enough interest in men was likely to be suspected of being a lesbian. During that time, being labeled a lesbian could devastate a woman's social or professional life. Furthermore, being an out lesbian was often downright risky. Women who openly chose to be lesbians were perceived to be threats to men. And as we mentioned earlier,
Threats to men? Okay.
masculinity was already considered to be in jeopardy. As a result, many lesbians married men for safety and security, as well as just to avoid the social stigma around homosexuality. Social conditions made it extremely difficult for a gay woman to find.
When I said in the beginning that women have high expectations, this is another factor though that makes dating like harder. nowadays. Well, not necessarily harder, but just different. Um, I have absolutely nothing against homosexuality or anything. Like I have absolutely nothing. Like I feel nothing. It's like I think everybody should be exactly the way they want to be, and I respect that like with my whole self. But what I do find a little bit odd is that that is taught in schools. I mean, I understand. No, wait, sorry. I understand that it's taught in schools in the sense of, a girl can be with a girl, a boy can be with a boy, you can be whatever you want and you can do whatever you want. But I think in some like states in America specifically, there's a whole like class for that. Like you go like through a course about this, which is just odd to me. I don't know why. That's like the only thing. But like apart from that, like but yeah, I just don't see it as a thing that I mean, it should be talked about in schools, like but not like have a whole course. I think everybody will eventually find themselves, and that's it.
Find a partner. But there were secret expressions a lesbian couple could use to indicate they were living an undercover gay lifestyle. For example, if you heard a lady refer to being in the life, she was probably a lesbian. Women might meet each other anywhere from a university to a prison, but living openly as a couple was difficult and isolating, unless that is, they also happened to be transients. Transient lesbians were generally freer to be themselves than their domestically rooted counterparts, and they could always rely on claims of traveling together for safety and companionship without having to justify their relationships. However, the trade-off was being unhoused during the Great Depression. Despite financial strife and concerns about venereal disease, prostitution remained lucrative throughout the Depression. During the 30s, women could do such work independently or in a house as a ringer. Being a ringer was generally safer and more lucrative, as ringers could have anywhere from 15 to 20 clients per day. But it also required being tested for disease and getting a certificate of health, which both madams and customers vastly preferred. Ringer houses were typically part of a chain of houses.
I don't know why this reminded me of like this motivational text that I found on the internet the other day. Okay, here it is. It says, "Have you ever heard a crackhead say, 'I have no money, I'm not going to smoke today'? No, they always find a way. Are you gonna let a crackhead out hustle you today?" That's some motivation for you guys right there.
And the women would be registered at a main house. Meanwhile, independent girls had to fend for themselves and were much more likely to be arrested. As a result, sex work underwent a change in authority during the Great Depression, as madams and criminal bosses became increasingly powerful over the girls they employed.
But yeah, it makes sense why that would be profitable. But yeah, that's why I was thinking about the quote, because even though they were poor, they would find the money to do that probably. So
Having no job means having no income, and no income makes family life a struggle. So during the Depression, having a lot of kids wasn't ideal. Most couples therefore actively tried to avoid pregnancies, which meant that birth control became essential. The problem was something called the Comstock Act of 1873. The act forbade the U.S. Postal Service and other common carriers from conveying obscene material that might be used to incite a crime, or certain materials related to abortions. But it was also used to silence birth control advocates. Given the change in social priorities, however, many states passed legislation allowing for women to have access to contraception, and women of the time generally welcomed birth control information and devices. Condoms for men were common, but with the push to have women control their own reproductive options, diaphragms and female condoms gave women the ability to actively control the size of their families. It was around this time that early versions of the birth control pill, as well as primitive intrauterine devices, began to revolutionize human reproduction. And as a result, fertility rates during the 1930s sunk to as few as 2 children per woman, down from over 3 just 2 decades earlier. Along with a rise in the use of birth control, the Depression also caused many young couples to decide that marriage just didn't make sense as an economic and familial building block.
Is this like when relationships swift? Like, this changed a lot of things when it comes to modern relationships as well. That's interesting.
Instead, couples increasingly started to live together without the legal designation of husband and wife. As one newspaper from the period described it, there were a lot of, we'll get married later on, but meanwhile, let's not wait romances. Luckily for the wedding industry, the Great Depression ended in 1939. But moving in with someone you really shouldn't have is still going strong to this day. So what do you think? Which of these facts surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.
I think it's interesting to see because clearly this had a big impact on the relationships in today's society as well. And I do wonder what the relationships will be like in the future, because they're shifting a lot. Like now it's not as common to get married, and they just always shift. Things shift. But yeah, it's interesting to see for sure. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me for this video. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.